everybody. Thank you for coming. It's very nice to see you all, friends old and new. These are normally very encouraging events, so it's good to gather on a nice winter night here. Our speaker tonight is going to be James Thomas. So James and I have known each other, well, our daughters have known each other for quite a while, and we've got to know each other kind of through our daughters. Largely, I guess first of all, due to a 1 hour stopover at London Heathrow that I was meant to take about 3 years ago, maybe more, and it ended up being an entire weekend, which we ended up at a party at James's garden, and we ended up having a great time with his whole family. So we've become really great friends since then, and James is a Bible teacher with a real passion for apologetics, which is what he's going to talk about tonight. But we've just had a great weekend together so far already, talking about things like architecture and interest in nutrition, and our families being a similar age as well. So it's been great, even sitting around the fire on a snowy day like this. It's talking about Israel, going to Israel, how churches ought to work, biblical Greek, or just chewing the fat generally. But it's been really good to have James here. Hello, do come in and join us. Hello there. Hi. Did I meet you on Gibson Street, sir? It was very nice to see you. Come in, sit down. You're very welcome here. But yeah, James definitely is a great Bible teacher, and he's going to give us 2 classes tonight. One of which he's taught before, and one of which he hasn't. So I'm not going to tell you which one is which. You can see if you can guess. I have seen the slides for the presentation tonight, but I have to say I do not understand them. I understand partially, but not definitely. Don't know what James is going to say exactly. So it's going to be great. You're going to learn a lot of really good stuff that you can, if you already have a faith, you can use to share that with others. If you don't have a faith, you'll be enriched through that as well. So that's going to be good. We're going to, I'm just looking at different ways of answering the questions that we ask as humans, the questions we ask about God, and the different places that those worldviews ultimately take us to. But like I say, I don't really totally get it, so I'm going to hand over, not waffle too much, but just hand over to James, who's going to teach, I think roughly about 2 30-minute sessions. We're going to have a Q&A after each one, and we'll have some refreshments in between as well. So just sit back and buckle in. I don't know if you've got buckles on your seats, but you might need them, because it's going to be great. So can I just hand over to you, and off you go.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you so much for the welcome. I do love Glasgow, and I've been there a few times as an architect, which you'll find out. Your architecture is amazing, and I also love the countryside, so I'll talk a bit about that. And we're talking the weekend, because it's tonight, and tomorrow morning as well, kind of linked together. It's about Christianity seriously. Can we still take Christianity seriously? And we're going to look at a variety of different things on that. As an overview, so it's right now in this first 30-minute bit, we're going to look at worldviews, and I'll try and explain what a worldview is. And we're going to look at morals and grief as well. So this is a bit broader. This isn't just about Christianity. And then after the break, we'll look at archaeology in the Bible and how accurate the Bible really is as well. And a little bit about me to start with. So this is my family. So that's me. My wife Amanda, who is down in Birmingham, she is a teacher, and she's at the KK thing teaching the teachers. And then my older son JJ, and my daughter Millie, and this is Darwin, the beagle, and one of these is Darcy and one of these is Reeve, and this is David Moe, the artificial intelligence robot. So we're a kind of interesting extended family. And about me, I'm an architect, so this is the most famous building I've done, which is an opera house in Morocco. So this was 9 years ago. Actually.
From space.
Yeah. This was the groundbreaking with the King of Morocco. My boss couldn't go, so I got to meet the King of Morocco. And this is 2 weeks ago when it opened. A little bit late. Other thing about me is I love going out, the outdoors. I love the trail. So this is the Pennine Way from near Coventry, near Sheffield, to Scotland. So the last time I was in Scotland was in Kirkutholm, which is just here. Sorry about the pronunciation there. And this scene was why I like it. So I'd just been overnight. I was 4 days into the trip, and I'd been on my own for the bleakest and most isolated and horrific weather overnight. And I came as the dawn was rising to this, which is Greg's hut. And there I was able to get a rest and have a sleep as the sun rises. So I adore this because it actually feels like it's a very spiritual journey for me doing these things. And I also love Bible archaeology stuff. Yeah. So this is that's the other kind of fourth quarter, if you like, of what I like. So this is Dead Sea Scrolls. This is Qumran. This is where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, in that cave there. And I got to go there a couple of years ago, which is an amazing place to go, and it's just fun. So, what am I talking about? Well, that's me. If I was going to, what makes us tick? So that's the kind of first bit. I suppose this kind of makes me tick. You know, this is some words of Jesus. I've come that they may have life and life to the full. So I suppose what makes me tick is having life to the full. And it's a kind of core belief. And I'm going to talk about core beliefs a bit. And this is a book I came across recently from Skye Jethani, which is interesting, called With. And he posed the question that a lot of people say that all religions lead to the same place. You know, but at the end of the day, they're all the same. But he disagrees with that, and I agree with that. He says it's more like this. All religions start in the same place, down in the valley. You know, he says the starting point, we all share a world confused by chaos. The life is inherently chaotic. And from this common beginning, the paths of religions diverge dramatically. But each one is an attempt to overcome suffering, fear, and death. And I think there's a real trophy in that. I thought that was really good, that actually the world is a scary place out there. Yeah. And religions and actually other belief systems are trying to make sense of an unkind, difficult world which is out there. And a polemic question, what do you believe? You know, I think what tonight, the first section particularly, would be to kind of understand, deep down, what are your thoughts? What are your belief patterns? You know, this isn't just about Christianity by any means, but what do you believe? You know, are you willing to share it? To be honest? Do you believe there's no God? Are you an atheist? Do you think there's an unknowable God or force? There's a deist? Do you think there is no truth, no objective truth, or everything is true? Everything's relative. That's a kind of postmodern view, and we're going to look at some of those things. And why would you do that? Well, Carl Jung, famous psychiatrist, says if one does not understand a person, one tends to regard him as a fool. You know, we live in a world where there's great controversy and fights and things going on. And I think if we all just understood and where people were coming from, what their worldview was, then we could treat each other more with respect. You know, even just because somebody has a different worldview from you doesn't mean you should disagree with them, but it's helpful to understand what makes someone tick. And I like this quote from, this is the seminal text about worldviews from James Sire, highly recommended. And he writes, for any man to be fully conscious intellectually, they must have a worldview. So it's good to know yourself. And what is a worldview? A set of assumptions to provide the foundation on what they live and have their being. You know, not just about religion, you know, but everyone to understand what deep down what they are. A lot of people won't open up to accept what it is. So worldviews. There's lots of different lists which have many overlaps. This is an amalgamation of different worldviews. So at the top, naturalism, modernism, atheism, and belief systems that come from that, nihilism and Marxism, which are slightly different terms of that. Then existentialism and postmodernism, which are and they may be an unworldview, is a kind of useful bit. There's links between those. New Age, which is kind of the newly emerging worldview, which has many links with paganism. Deism, Eastern pantheistic monism, so it's Hinduism, Buddhism, and others as well. And theism, and under theism, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. So different worldviews, and people who follow these things will have very different outlooks on the way they look at the world outside them. And what makes for a good worldview? So, all right, we'll be straight into it. Some good worldviews are better than others. But firstly, it should be true. It should be true with the reality that's out there. If a worldview isn't true, then you should look back at it and go, maybe that's not good. And it should also not just be true, but to answer the important questions. You know, like if it doesn't answer the questions that are important to you, that's not good. And then thirdly, it should improve us. All of us should be better for the worldview that we follow. You know, to be somebody, actually, I think all humanity wants to improve themselves, and it should be that way. And questions that need answer. This is my take on these. And I start with an unusual one. How does it help you deal with grief? Grief is something which is really tough and challenging, the difficult things. How does a worldview help you get through the really tough things on life? What's your purpose? I was just talking, Mandy, about purpose. It's really important to have a purpose in life. Yeah. And for a while I lost my purpose, you know, and it was really helpful to re-find it. And then, how do we know what's right and wrong? You know, what are morals, what are ethics, what's the difference, and what happens to a person at death? So important questions. Let's go through these worldviews. Okay. Naturalism, modernism, atheism, and the belief systems that come from it, Marxism and nihilism. It's been around a long time. A lot of people think this is a kind of modern movement coming out with scientists and all these things, but actually Thrasymachus, about 375 BC, is recorded in Plato's Republic saying, without God, might makes right. And you see that in society. That if you don't have a God, it's just, you know, one of his followers, I believe, is Alexander the Great, who, when on his deathbed, said, you know, when asked by the 4 generals who was going to take over, he said, whoever is the strongest. You know, it's a view. It's not a particularly pleasant worldview, but it's a view. And atheists that shape our society today, not so much those, but it's Karl Marx, Sigmund Freud, Friedrich Nietzsche. And I'm going to start with Friedrich Nietzsche. God is dead. Key, well-known thing. It's more like God is unimportant in modern society, was his view. And he believed that mankind must reinvent himself through the Übermensch. My German is not great.
Übermensch.
Thank you. Thank you. My son's girlfriend is German, so I need to work on it. You know, that's a Superman in a new image of greatness. And one of the things I found with this book that was really helpful was it helped me understand the cultural references to all these things. So I grew up reading The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Catch-22 by Joseph Hemingway, Fahrenheit 451. As an adult, I read some Frank Kafka, some Ernest Hemingway, and all those things helped me to think, oh, okay, I do get this a little bit. I do understand some references to nihilism. And I've got to say, I think it's a very honest view, a brutally honest worldview, unlike some. And if I wasn't a Christian, I'd be a nihilist, you know, because there's an honesty to it, you know, there's not a fakeness to it. But with that, I find it unrelentlessly, when I was sort of looking into it, dark, you know, in terms of hopeless. And I have to look at what the effect it has on his followers. We talked about that. So Adolf Hitler is probably the most famous, and Nietzsche's nihilism had a central place in National Socialism. Soldiers going off to battle would have a field grey copy of this book, The Sword and the Spirit, Nietzsche philosophy. So every soldier going off to war, German soldier, would have a copy. You can still pick them up in Germany today. And within that bit, then the purification of the Aryan race from Jews, Gypsies, and disabled was completely accepted. The effect. Another take is Marxism or Maoism. I forgot to bring this. I have a treasured copy of the Little Red Book at home, which is, but within that, Marxism, Maoism, atheist teaching, Christianity is generally strongly excluded in those countries. And you think about the USSR under Stalin, China under Mao, Cambodia under Pol Pot, North Korea. Actually, all the greatest genocides of the last 100 years come out of a atheist worldviews, not theist Christian worldviews. Scientists, it's frequently believed that scientism is, scientists are all atheists, but they're not. I'm not saying they're all Christians, but Darwin wrote 3 years before he died, I have never been an atheist. He got really irate with people. He was a deist. He thought there was I'll talk about that later. Albert Einstein, I'm not an atheist. He was very clear about it. I read a biography of not a Christian, just a secular biography of, he thought two things proved to him that there was a God. One was the universe, the existence of it, the perfectness of the way the universe fit together. The second one was music. He was a violin player, and the fact that music existed to him was a proof of God. And Francis Collins is the guy who was responsible for mapping the human genome. And he wrote this. This was in 2000 when he stood next to Bill Clinton in the United States and announced they finished mapping the human genome. And he wrote this. He said this. It's awe-inspiring to realize that we have caught the first glimpses of our own instruction book, previously known only to God.
Amen.
Wow.
Which is just such a great quote. And the question, does atheism make you a better person? Existentialism, postmodernism, the unworldview. So I put these, there are similarities and overlap between these two. You can read different things. Vivre sévère, vivre l'absurde, which is Albert Camus in The Myth of Sisyph, which is to live is to bring the absurd to life. And Albert Camus, Jean-Paul Sartre, really as a reaction onto the darkness of nihilism and modernism, moved to existentialism. And are really saying to live is to bring the absurd to life. That life is, it's kind of a joke, a comedy, because there is no meaning behind it. Life is meaningless, therefore we live this absurd life. And there is an overlap with postmodernism, which is considered very kind of modern, and it's probably the most moving modern view. Hello. But it's not really modern. In John 18, you hear Jesus speaking in his trial before Pontius Pilate, and Jesus says, when he's been asked, just mano a mano with Pontius Pilate, said, what are you doing? And Jesus says, I've come to bear witness to the truth. Pontius Pilate's response is, what is truth? And Pontius Pilate, at that time, about 30 AD, the Roman life of Romans had been the 5 senses that you had to, 5 qualities every Roman needed to have, which were fides, pietas, majestas, virtus, and gravitas. It was like gravity, honor, these cultural values that every Roman citizen was supposed to have. But by that point, these were being abandoned. There was no truth anymore. And this is linked, I believe, some people believe, to the answer. There is no truth anymore, And Pontius Pilate refused to do anything and allowed Jesus to be crucified. Postmodernism. Truth, if such a thing exists at all, this is a postmodern view, is the property of culture. There is no absolute truth. All truth is relative. It is created by societies. There is no ultimate moral authority or moral absolute. it's very common. You know, there is no truth anymore. You know, the roots of postmodernism actually come from architecture. In the 1980s, when I was studying architecture, postmodernism was the in thing, and it was this kind of pastiche. And the reason I show this is it's the MI6 building in central London by Terry Farrell, was a very significant postmodern building. I've got to say, postmodernism has not lasted. It has been abandoned as an architectural style. Architects have turned their back on it because while it's interesting intellectually, it doesn't work. A building which is just a pastiche of previous things has been abandoned. And actually architects have gone back to modernism, you know, which is more the work I do today, you know, or alternative views as well, but definitely not postmodernism. And I found this amusing. You know, the blowing up of this from the James Bond movie was too good an image not to miss. But this is from Sire. Postmodernism puts the smiling face of arrogance from the face of naturalism, modernism, atheism, but no face displays a confidence in truth, a trust in reality, or a credible hope for the future. It's, you know, we learned this in architecture. There is no hope for the future in postmodernism. And the question for you, do you believe in a postmodern worldview where there is no objective truth?
No.
New Age. New, but with links to paganism. It's an emerging New Age worldview, considerable overlap. And again, literature. I found literature helped me to understand this. So Aldous Huxley, Philip K. Dick, Robert Heinlein. You can tell I was a big science fiction reader as a teenager. Movies like The Matrix. William Blake, for those who are artists, poets, is very much around this. And Carl Jung. Carl Jung was a bit of a mixture. I showed his quote earlier as a psychiatrist. He was a Christian and New Age, but he believed that there was the age of Pisces, so a lot of stuff from astronomy. So he believed that there was an age of Pisces, which was Jesus, and now we're moving into the next age.
Age of Aquarius?
Yes, good man.
Oh, I just know the song.
Yeah, we're moving into the the song. We're moving into the age of Aquarius, which is what his view was when he wrote this. And there's a lot of moving back to kind of stuff with this, which, you know, Old Testament would condemn. You know, Deuteronomy 18 forbids a lot of practices of, you know, witchcraft and such like, which are common into this. But it's an emerging view of more and more followers. Deism. Deism is, who follows it? The US founding fathers. I'm supposed to say fathers. Someone correct that. So people like Washington, Jefferson, Franklin, Madison were all deists. Darwin, Einstein, would you probably describe as deist as well. And deism is the historical result of the decay of theism, Christian theism. And deists, you get cold deists who are hostile to Christianity, like Voltaire and Buckminster Fuller, saying, I have faith in the integrity of the... actually, I'll skip that. And warm deists, like Benjamin Franklin, who say the immortality of the soul ought to be worshipped. And deists sort of believe that human beings have intelligence, a sense of morality, but none of these is grounded in God's character. None of us have a special relationship with God. Each of us is on our own. You know, God started things off, and then he's abandoned and has no interest in anymore. And God is unknowable. And the chief advocate of deism is which is very appealing, and probably the prime reason why is Yoda, the Force, a mysterious energy field created by life that binds the galaxy together. Eastern pantheistic monism, so Hinduism, Buddhism, and the like, and this is a very complex. Even Hinduism on its own is complex. Atman is Brahman, a key teaching of Hinduism. You know, the Atman, the soul, is when we die, Atman is swallowed up in Brahman. You know, we don't last, we're swallowed up into the whole. But it's not, in some ways, not really a single religion. You know, difficult to define how many gods there are, perhaps, common view, 33 million gods. And the physical world is an illusion. The physical world is evil. And Buddhism, which was actually a reaction against Hinduism in many ways, that there is probably no God. It's a philosophy of psychology. But again, the cause of suffering is desire. You know, if you don't desire, you know, that's fine. And the physical world is an illusion. Leave the physical world behind. You know, don't consider it. Allow suffering to go on. And theism. And theism incorporates Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. All a theistic God, a single God. Long views. And there are multiple links. More so, obviously, in some ways, Judaism, Christianity, but actually many links with Islam as well. And I'm going to focus for time on Christianity, on these. You know, and a key one. I'm the way, the truth, and life. You know, thinking back of that image from Sky Jithani, you know, like always lead to God, and they're the same. They're not. I mean, not according to Jesus. I'm the way, the truth, and life. There is only one. And, you know, Judaism still awaits the Messiah and teaches in the Talmud. The Talmud talks about, from about 100 AD, recorded that the Talmud actually writes about Jesus, that he was killed by the Romans, Herzog 1. Islam teaches there is no Messiah, that Jesus was just a prophet. So they're very different views about Jesus within the three. And Augustine. Augustine is like the key teacher of the early church from about 400 AD. He's amazing, Saint Augustine or Augustine. And his teachings are profound. And he talks about two things, the book of creation and the book of life. And what he means is the Bible and the world outside. And he says that both equally teach us about God. And within that, that there's order. Everything we observe, both in the Bible and in the world around us, shows an order, that the world is orderly. So if you think about the Bible, you have things like the 10 Commandments, the 8 Beatitudes. There's an order to it. If you look at the universe around us, we have the law of gravity. We have the theory of gravity, should we say, and the theory of evolution. There is an order to it. Things work. And actually both reflect the order, the personality of a greater God, which is profound. And what has the Christian world given us? Science. Most scientists, even today, are theists. You know, they have been, they continue to be. You know, the surveys of scientists are the majority of science are believe in a personal God. The abolition of slavery from the UK, William Wilberforce. You know, civil rights, women's rights. The majority of all benevolent works around the world are still done by, not enough, not as much as the 1st, 2nd and 3rd century, and that those benevolent works are not only done to other Christians, you know, but beyond. So to finish this part, a good worldview successfully answers the important questions that human asks. And also, one of those is how we deal with grief. And I'm going to move on to that. There are other questions that we talked about, but grief is a really profound and deep one as well. So we're going to talk about the moral law and grief and morals as well on this. And the moral argument is, if there is no God, then there are no universal objective moral values. Sort of a postmodern view. But in fact, moral values, objective moral values do exist. You know, I could say some really horrible things at this point, you know, and everybody would be revolted by them. You know, I could talk about death, I could talk about
eating babies.
Yeah, I could talk about, thank you. I could talk about eating babies, you know, like, hey, let's all go and eat some baby somewhere. And everybody would be revolted by it. I mean, everybody would be. It's an objective, moral, universal value that every human has, that's a disgusting thing to do. And because we all have this, a universal value, then that's a proof that God exists. And I would say, the move to postmodernism, and the loss of a theistic, people believe that objective moral values are disappearing, aren't there. But that's not true. They are there.
Wow.
C.S. Lewis wrote in the 1940s. Back then, he thought that righteousness and sin are old-fashioned in the 1940s. How much more so today? And then the moral law by Immanuel Kant, C.S. Lewis, and various. All humans have a set of morals because we're all made in God's image. These morals are evidence of the evident existence of God. And C.S. Lewis goes on and says the difference between morality and ethics, and this is by C.S. Lewis with changes by DJ, that morality is keeping my own ship in order, and that ethics is in how we relate to other people. So if you've got a fleet of ships going along, you've got to do two things. You've got to keep your own ship in order so it can keep on sailing, so it can keep on moving. And you're also part of a fleet, part of a community like this here. So how you relate to other people is ethics. So there's two sides. And let's talk about the problem of grief. Relationships are hard. Marriage is hard. I love my wife. We've been just gone through 29 years as married. So, and we're, but any relationship that you care for, where you care for somebody, is by its nature painful. To have a close relationship with anyone is hard, has hardness. Other things are really hard. I founded a company, an architecture company, with my old boss, who I felt close to, a really good other friend, a couple of other guys as well. And a few years later, 4 years later, I called into a room and I was kicked out of the company. I was shocked and hurt and grieved on this. A while back, I got a phone call and my nephew had taken his own life, aged 22, which rocked me. Just Tuesday this week, I went to the funeral of my oldest friend. We'd been together since we were 12. We'd never lost contact. And we, steady friendship for 44 years. And that was really hard. Grief is challenging. And I like these words from Queen Elizabeth. Grief is the price we pay for love. And I think that's really true. The only solution to not grieve is to not love anybody, to not just to turn your back on the world. They're really profound words. All humanity grieves. And the only worldview that has an answer to grief is Christian theism. This is my defense of Christian theism. The only one that can have an answer for it. And why do we suffer grief? Primarily it's the actions, the sins of other people. The vast majority of grief that you will suffer, that I will suffer, is because somebody else has done something, horrific. Quite often, it's it's us being ridiculous, us being sinning, our own actions, whatever that is. A question mark, a big question mark, is creation flawed from the fall? And I'll leave that one. Sometimes I believe that God disciplines us, and and we go through a tough time to be better. Helps us to grow. When I go and do a challenge, I like doing hard things. When I go and do that race and walk from Sheffield to Scotland, then I do it partly because I need to go through hard things to do those things. If we namby-pamby, our godly response gives God glory. That's a tough teaching, but it's a biblical teaching. We come to know Christ because Christ suffered through it. Without suffering, there is no joy. We only understand joy because we've been through hardships. And after great victory comes challenge, which is just so this is what I would say is a theistic explanation of why grief is there. And this is, I think, a better explanation of grief than any of the other worldviews has. And this is why we should camp on this. You know, a lot of people will say, well, look at Christianity and say their attack against it is about grief. But actually, I would say the opposite is the truth, is that what we have, what Christians have in Christian theism, is a very difficult explanation. I'm not saying this is easy anyway, but this is the only one which has any substance to it as an explanation of grief. And Jesus wept. You know, theism teaches, Christian theism teaches that the man God Jesus actually understood suffering, you know, unlike anything else. And that's Old Testament as well. The Lamentations, through the Old Testament as well. And he reaches out. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Jesus, at the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount, his greatest set of teachings in the Bible. So if I go all the way back to my worldview, you know, I think it's linked to that. And I've had to come to understand this, that what I try and make sense of it is life to the full. Life to the full includes lots of things. It's, you know, work, it's family, it's doing crazy sporting events, it's knowing the word and understand that. But it's also accepting that there'll be grief because we love people. That is part of the journey, and that will make me stronger. That's it for this first section. Thank you for sticking with me. We now have some time for Q&A. I think Mike, anyone else wants to come up and join that. And any questions. So this is a prompt. It doesn't have to be anything about this first point. Please come up and ask a question. First question, Simon.
Can I ask you, basically today's...
if it's too hard, I'm going to ask you guys.
Today's culture is very, very much the wokeism and cancel culture.